Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So today, we're going to talk about what today is. It's a special day on the Jewish calendar, and it's going to relate to everything that sorry. Okay. So in the last classes, we were discussing positivity and how there's always time to fix our mistakes and how everything in life can be looked at through positive lenses and never to feel like we've given up. So actually today is a holiday, not a big holiday, a little known holiday that really exemplifies and brings out this point. And the point is that there's always a second chance, that there's never a time when we say, it's too late, I give up, I'm not going to be forgiven. There's always a time to look back and say, you know what, I'm going to fix the mistakes that I made. So today is called Pesach Sheni. It's exactly 1 month on the Hebrew calendar since the first Passover, since the main Passover. And a month later is called Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. So what's special about this day? Or actually, what is the observance of this day? In the time of the temple, when the Jewish people were in the desert, not in the temple, as we know, the famous story, they left Egypt, they did the sacrifice, they put the matzah on their back, and they ran out of Egypt. They come into the desert, and there was a problem. Some of the people had not been able to bring the sacrifice. Why? So we go all the way back into Jewish Egyptian history, when first Joseph came down to Egypt, then his father, when there was a hungry father, and his brothers ended up coming down to Egypt. His father's about to die, and he asked his sons for one favor. And the favor is, can you please make sure, he wants them to make sure that he's buried in Israel. So they take his body to Israel, and then eventually the brothers all start dying, they get very old, and then when it's Joseph, he's the viceroy, he's the assistant king of Egypt, and he realizes that because of his status, he's not going to be able to be buried in Israel. He's going to have to be buried in Egypt. But he begs his brothers, he says, I know there's going to come a time when the Jewish people are going to leave Egypt. Please take my bones out of Egypt. So they make this promise, and, eventually, it's many hundreds of years later, more like 100 and something years later, and the Jews are about to leave Egypt, and they're going to keep this promise to Joseph. Where are Joseph's bones? Joseph's bones were at the bottom of the Nile River. So they need to bring up his bones from the Nile River, and they put in the special mix of God's name. It's written on a piece of paper. They throw it into the river. It says, Ale Shor, come up ox. Each of the tribes had a specific animal or some kind of symbol associated with their name. And Joseph's name was associated with an ox. So it says, come up ox, and Joseph's bones miraculously come up. Now the people who are carrying the bones, which they're going to take into the desert and eventually take into Egypt, obviously in some kind of a special box, they become impure, because anyone who's in touch with a dead body is automatically impure. So they're holding on to these bones. They come into Egypt, and they kind of complain to Moshe, and they say, everyone was able to bring the sacrifice, but since we were busy taking the bones of Joseph, we weren't pure and we weren't able to bring the sacrifice. So Moshe doesn't really know what to do because, well, too bad, like, you were doing something good, but in the process, you missed out on this opportunity, on this chance to bring the sacrifice. So they begging, they said, really, we want to bring the sacrifice. Please, please, please see if there's another opportunity. Moshe says, I'm going to ask God. And Moshe asks God, and Moshe tells God, the people said, La manigara. Why do we have to miss out? We're doing a mitzvah. Why can't we be given another chance to do this mitzvah? So God says, you know what? I'm going to give them another chance. I'm going to give them Pesach Sheni. I'm going to give them another opportunity to bring the sacrifice. So on this day, on this Pesach Sheni, the time of the temple, the time of the desert, whenever the sacrifices actually took place, anyone who missed out on the first time, even if he missed out whether it was because he was impure or he or she was impure, whether there was some other engagement at the time or something going on that they weren't able to bring the sacrifice, whatever it was, even if real on purpose, they didn't want to bring the sacrifice. They were given the opportunity now to bring the sacrifice again. And so now it's Pesach Sheni. We can't bring the sacrifice. We've times of that we're in now. There's no temple. Everyone's always impure. So the whole idea, it seems, of Pesach Sheni doesn't really exist for us. It's not really relevant. So what does it mean to us? So first of all, it's a great day to eat matzah. I mean, I know matzah is not necessarily everyone's favorite food, but matzah is really the symbol, so to speak, of Pesach, one of the big symbols. So we try to eat matzah just to give some kind of importance to the day. But on a deeper level, what does this holiday mean to us? The fact that this holiday exists now, even though there's no temple, it means that there must have some type of internal message that's relevant for us. So the message is that there's always a second chance, no matter what happens, because the Jews in the time of the temple, it didn't matter why they didn't bring that sacrifice. It didn't matter if someone was angry at God and said, I'm angry at God for this and this and this reason, I'm not bringing a sacrifice. They're still given a second chance. No matter what happens, they're still given a chance to bring the sacrifice. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe once said that Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, teaches us that nothing is ever lost. One can always correct themselves. This applies even now. It doesn't matter whether it has to do with our spiritual level, what we're involved with, whether it's in prayer or charity or tefillin or lighting Shabbat candles, whatever it is. If we missed out opportunities, if we don't feel like we're up to par with what we're able to do, we always have a second chance. There's never a time we say it's too late. So too, we can take this lesson and apply it to our interpersonal relationships, whether it's with a family member we haven't spoken to in a while. We got into some kind of a fight. I don't even remember why I'm fighting with that cousin. You know what? It's never too late to make up and to fix these relationships that we have. So I think that this lesson is especially important now. And it's especially important at a time when we're all at home and we have more time to think and we have more time to see what's important in life. When there's this virus or illness going on around the world, we have to focus on priorities, and it's a good opportunity to think about what mistakes we've made or what things we can make better, and to take this idea that it's never too late. There's always the concept of a second. There's always the opportunity that we're given for a second chance. And hold on. This is very interesting that this holiday comes very close to another holiday. And the other holiday is happening in a few days, Lag BaOmer. Now, Lag BaOmer is usually a very exciting holiday. It's a time when children go out and make bonfires, or adults make bonfires. We have barbecues. It's a time of gathering. It's a time of fun. But, obviously now we can't have that kind of gathering or that kind of fun. But it's still a really important and exciting holiday. So what is Lag BaOmer? What's the lesson of Lag BaOmer? So Lag BaOmer, let's also go back in history, and we're going to connect it to this lesson as well. We're counting the days of the Omer. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they were on a really low spiritual level because they lived in Egypt so long that they had integrated with the Egyptians. And integrated with the Egyptians meant that they were very involved in idol worship as well. Idol worship is obviously polar opposite of serving God. So they came out of Egypt, and right away they had to go through a transformation. They had to go from one extreme to the other. Their idol worship had to be exchanged for their connection to one God. So they come out of Egypt, and God gives them like this cleansing process, so to speak, which is every single day we're going to fix a different part of ourselves. And even now, and there's many different resources online that we could read about the different days of the Omer and how each day has an important part of our personality and ourselves that we can try to fix or change or enhance. And what are these things? So there are 7 midos, there are 7 attributes, and each of these attributes are included in each other attribute. So for example, the first one is kindness. There's kindness, but there's not just plain kindness. There's kindness within kindness, which is the ultimate level of kindness. But sometimes pure kindness isn't good, because if you just show kindness to a child all the time, if you never show them any type of strength, or you never try to discipline a child, then your kindness is going to hurt them. So there's discipline within kindness. Gevura shebechesed. There is tifera shebechesed. There is beauty within kindness. So all of these are integrated into each other. And every single day we focus on a different one of these attributes, all the way until we reach the giving of the Torah. So by the time we've gotten to the 49 days, we've refined all these character traits, or at least we've put effort into it. So too, the Jews did this in the time of the temple, and again, in the time when they were in the desert. And nowadays, we're able to do it as well in our own personal lives. So they counted each of these days, and until 49 days. What's his Lag BaOmer? Lag is Lamed, which is 30, and Gimel, which is 33. What's the 33rd day of the Omer? So there are two special events that happen on this day. The first one is, there was a great rabbi named Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva himself has his own very fascinating story. He was a shepherd, and he worked for a very wealthy man, not just a wealthy man, but a great scholar, as well as his name was Kalba Savua. He was his shepherd, as was it was a popular job at the time. And Kalba Savua had a daughter named Rachel, and Rachel, she saw something in Akiva. She saw the shepherd, this simple shepherd, and she said, "I see that you have potential to become a great scholar." And he said, "What do you mean? I'm 40 years old. Not only haven't I studied a single Jewish word in my life, I can't even read Hebrew." She said, I'm telling you, I see potential." He said, "That's a pipe dream. I don't know what you're talking about." She decides she's so sure of the potential that she sees in him that she decides that she's going to marry him. Obviously, her father, the wealthy and the wise Kalba Savua, gets extremely angry. His beautiful, wise daughter wants to marry the simple shepherd. And he says to her, "If you're going to marry him, then leave my home." And she does that. She leaves his home. She's estranged from her father. She keeps encouraging her husband, and says that one day Rabbi Akiva goes into a field, and he sees a little drip onto a rock. There's something dripping, drip, 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 and he sees that there's a little ridge, a little like a dent in the rock. And he looks at the rock and he thinks, if the water can cause a dent in a rock, then my mind, I can study Torah. I'm able to take some Torah into myself. If a rock can be changed by water, then my mind can be changed through study. And he starts to study, and he starts with the Aleph Beis, and he continues to study, and eventually he becomes a great sage. After 14 years of studying, and he comes back into the town, and he has 40,000 students with him, and people flock to this great rabbi. His wife, Rachel runs to him, and everyone says, "Get this woman, why is she coming to the rabbis?" And he says, "Everything that I have and everything you have is because of her, because she believed in my Torah study." Which is another lesson, that when you really believe in someone, you can change their life. And different people want to meet with this great rabbi. And one of the people who wants to meet with him is, unbeknownst to his father-in-law, is actually his father-in-law. Kalba Savua meets with this great rabbi, and he says, "My greatest regret in life is my daughter, my estranged daughter. She married the simple shepherd, and she's estranged now. And I kicked her out of my house. I feel really bad. Just want to get her back." And Rabbi Akiva looks at him and he says, that shepherd is me. And his father-in-law is shocked. How could it be that the uneducated shepherd is this great rabbi? And obviously, he comes back into their life, and Rabbi Akiva he's one of the greatest scholars. He's very well known for one very important tenet of our faith, which is the verse, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." You shall love your friend, you shall love your fellow as yourself. The verse is, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, zeh klal gadol b'Torah." Rabbi Akiva said, if you love your fellow as yourself, this is one of the foundations of the Torah. So what prompted Rabbi Akiva to say this is one of the foundations of the Torah? I mean, we know this. It says it in many places. Why was this such a tenet of his teachings? Because Rabbi Akiva's students, he had many students, and they were great rabbis, but they had one fault. And their fault was that they couldn't stand if the other person had a different opinion. So obviously people have different opinions, and the whole Talmud is a whole bunch of different opinions and people arguing which opinion is right, which opinion is wrong. But Rabbi Akiva's students took this concept to the next level. Instead of just arguing or discussing the ideas of the Torah and the ideas of the Talmud, they actually fought about it. They fought about it to the extent that they couldn't stand if someone else had another opinion. They couldn't listen to the opinion of another person. They believed in their opinion so much. It's like we see in politics nowadays, that people can't even argue over politics because they can't stand to hear another person's opinion. They couldn't stand to hear another person's opinion. And because of their greatness, and sometimes great people are judged more harshly, there is a plague. We don't like to hear that word, but there's a plague amongst his students, and many of them died. Rabbi Akiva told them the reason for this plague is because of your intolerance for each other, not because you had different opinions. We can have different opinions, but it's because of your intolerance for each other. The plague went on for 30 days, and the plague ended on Lag BaOmer. Now, during the days of the Omer, there's actually a custom, and that it's kind of a state of mourning. We don't cut hair, we don't listen to music, there's no weddings, and that's because we're mourning the students of Rabbi Akiva. When did this plague stop? This plague stopped on Lag BaOmer. So Lag BaOmer is a day of celebration because the plague stopped. In addition, about a few hundred years later, not even, I would say less than 100 years later, one of Rabbi Akiva's disciples, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he died. He's known as the great Kabbalist. He's one of the great teachers of Kabbalah. Actually, some of the original teachings of Kabbalah come from the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. When he died, it said there was a great fire around his bed, and he asked that the day of his death should not be a sad day, but should be a day of celebration. And every year on this day, it is a great day of celebration. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried on the mountain of Miron. If any of you have ever been to Tzfat, Tzfat is one mountain, and Miron is on another mountain. You could see the mountain of Miron from the mountain of Tzfat. There's actually an Israeli and IDF base right in the top of the mountain as well. It's a custom and it's tradition that every year thousands and thousands of people go to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and there's huge celebrations. There's bonfires, there's dancing, there's singing. Since we don't cut hair during days of Lag BaOmer because of mourning, there's a special hair cutting ceremony on Lag BaOmer, which is the cutting of the hair of boys who have just turned 3. And this celebration for many boys takes place in Miron. It's a very, I've never been there, but I've heard it's like unlike anything anyone's ever seen. Unfortunately, this year, I'm sure it's not going to be as usual, but it's usually a great celebration. So it's a great joy. And part of the reason for going out going outside and having bonfires and picnics outside is because, first of all, there's a lot of connection between nature and Kabbalah, but also during the times of Rabbi Akiva and also during the times of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it was about when he was a little younger, there's a decree against teaching Torah. So, we know the famous story of Hanukkah, there's a decree against teaching Torah. So the children would sit in hiding and they would study. And when the Greek soldiers came, they would take the little top, they would spin the top, and when the soldiers came in, they would say, we're not studying Torah, we're just playing. And that became known as a dreidel. So too, in the times of when the Romans decreed against studying Torah, the children would go into a cave or whatever, and they would study. And when the Roman soldiers came, they would go outside and they would play with bows and arrows. And it's also a custom to play with bows and arrows to remember that the Jews' defiance against the decrees to not study Torah, and how they continued to study, and they found ways around it. So it's a great day of celebration. But we see this idea that there's never a lost opportunity, that there's always a second chance. We see this on Lag BaOmer. Yes, there are bad things that happen to the students of Rabbi Akiva, but eventually the plague stopped because they came together and they realized what they had done wrong. And we see this, when the Jews left Egypt, they were involved in idol worship, and they weren't the most spiritual or maybe the closest to God, but they were able to fix that up. And then they were able to receive the Torah as much better human beings. And for ourselves also, we constantly have these opportunities for growth. We fall, we get up, and we're able to continue growing. A child, a baby, he would get nowhere if we wouldn't let a baby fall, like we discussed before, he would never be able to walk. So we have to be able to fall and then get up again so that we can learn how to walk. So now there's an interesting discussion. So we understand this idea of the great lesson of this day and how we need to really internalize it. And we all look into our own lives and know our mistakes and know what we have to work on. And we use this day of Pesach Sheni as a lesson, and we've used the days of the Omer as specific examples of how we can make ourselves a little better in different aspects of our lives. But there's an interesting question that arises about Pesach Sheni, about the second Pesach. So it says that the question is, there's two different ideas. There's two different perspectives about Pesach Sheni. Is Pesach Sheni just a compensation for the first Pesach? A person couldn't bring the sacrifice on the first Pesach, so now he's compensating for that and bringing the sacrifice on the second Pesach. Or is it a festival in its own right? Okay. So if it's a festival on its own right, then maybe someone could bring the sacrifice the second time. But no, you cannot bring the sacrifice the second time. So there's an interesting idea about, these two different opinions about Pesach Sheni. A child who became bar mitzvah or someone who converted, they were obviously, the person converted in between the first Pesach and the second Pesach. So the first Pesach, they weren't even able to bring the sacrifice. The child who was not bar mitzvah yet, the first Pesach, they were not even able to bring the sacrifice. So for them, the second Pesach is actually a holiday on its own. It's not compensating for anything because they couldn't bring the sacrifice then. They were not even at a stage in their life where they could bring the sacrifice. So when the previous Rebbe writes that nothing is ever lost, one can always correct themselves, it seems like for some people this doesn't really apply. Because if someone doesn't have the obligation on the first Pesach, then what are they compensating for? What are they correcting? With regard to the child, it's possible that the child could be included in his father's first sacrifice, even though he's not obligated. So it could be in the second sacrifice, he's kind of making up for that. Like if his father didn't include him, so he's making up for that. Now, there's also an interesting idea about the convert, that it says about a convert in the Torah, it calls her, it says the convert who converts. Why does it say the convert who converts? Shouldn't it say the person who converts? So the Chidah, one of the commentaries, tell us that by saying the convert who converts, the Torah is telling us that the convert always has a Jewish soul. It just needs to be revealed. So the convert always has their Jewishness that's not even revealed until conversion. So maybe we're saying, yes, they actually kind of underneath everything, they did have that obligation because they still had that soul of a Jew, but it just had to be revealed. So they are still compensating. So these are, two interesting ideas about both the convert and the child, how they're still kind of compensating. So the previous Rebbe's idea that Pesach Sheni teaches us how nothing is ever lost is really kind of being brought out through this idea. That through the act of conversion, the soul of a convert is being revealed. And it's revealed how they're obligated to fulfill the Torah and mitzvahs. And the fact that their soul has converted reveals to us that they always had the connection to the sacrifice, even to the first sacrifice. And therefore, they have to make up for that sacrifice as well. But they can only bring the sacrifice to fruition once they have converted. So we see this idea still stands. The idea that it is a holiday on its own, because for the people who couldn't bring the sacrifice before, this holiday speaks for itself. But there's still the idea of compensation. There's still the idea that we always have a second chance and nothing is ever lost. And we see again, and I want to reiterate the importance of this connection to Lag BaOmer, because Pesach Sheni there's not that much to celebrate besides for eating matzah and its lesson. But this brings us right into the idea of Lag BaOmer, where we're actually able to celebrate in a more active way the idea of there's always a second chance. That even though there was kind of a time of mourning before, now we're able to celebrate the lives of these students who died. Now we're able to bring the celebration into our lives. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and I want to go back to that to talk about him a little bit, because when we're speaking about the idea of there's always a second chance, which is what the previous Rebbe is teaching us, and the idea of the seven midos, the seven times seven, the 49 attributes that we're refining. A lot of this comes from Hasidus, and a lot of it comes from Kabbalah. And Kabbalah and Hasidus, which looks at the internal source of the Torah and the internal parts of our soul. That, we know the famous "Don't judge a book by its cover," and the whole idea of Kabbalah and of Hasidus is that what we see on the outside is not necessarily a reflection of what's on the inside. That each of us has a soul, and no one is able to know what's inside another person, or no one is able to ever know the level of another person's soul. And when we look at another person, we should look at them and not see what they have on the outside. We should be able to see that internally they have something that's much greater. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was one of the first who actually revealed these internal parts of the Torah, and the idea that there's something behind everything, and that there's not only a soul in human beings or even animals, there's a soul in the food we eat. By eating food and saying a blessing, we're revealing the soul within the food, that there's a soul within everything. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai also taught us something else. Sometimes Judaism people tend to take it very seriously, or have a little melancholy associated with Judaism. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught us something in Kabbalah that was later expounded on in Hasidus. We know the importance of doing mitzvahs. We know the importance of studying. And now Hasidus explained to us the importance of every single human being and every single soul. But we don't always understand or really take to heart how important joy is. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught us that serving God, doing Torah mitzvos, is not just enough on a superficial level, but it has to be filled with joy. And the joy has to really encapsulate everything that we do. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that's why he wanted this day of his death to be such a happy day, because that was his life. His life was all about happiness and joy in everything that you do. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, this was one of the first lessons he taught a very distraught European world, which had just experienced many pogroms and the Chmielnicki massacres. When he revealed the Hasidus to the people in Russia and Poland at that time, he taught them that serving God and going about our daily life has to be filled with joy. It's not enough just to do what's right, we have to do it happily. And when we're able to do it happily, we're able to bring happiness to others as well. And in fact, the joy of Lag BaOmer exceeds that of other holidays. And there was a student of another great rabbi, the Arizal, who would say a prayer lamenting the destruction of the temple every single day. But on Lag BaOmer, he wouldn't say it, because if he would say it, he knew something negative would happen. But because Lag BaOmer has that joy that's infused in this day. And when we speak about Pesach Sheni and always having another chance, we have to take this idea and not make it like something difficult, because we have to think about the mistakes we made. Have joy in the fact that we're given this opportunity to make up for any mistakes that we made. And like Omer brings this idea out. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it says something interesting. We learn something interesting about his life. It says that during the life of Rabbi Akiva, a rainbow was never seen. What's a rainbow? Rainbows are beautiful. But rainbows, on the other hand, kind of are a negative symbol, because God, when was the first rainbow? After the flood, Noah's flood, God brought a rainbow. And the rainbow was God's covenant to the world that he's never going to destroy the world again. So seeing a rainbow is kind of God's promise. He's showing us his promise that he's never going to destroy the world. But if he has to show us his promise, then there might be some trouble brewing that God has to like show us, okay, whatever's going on, but I won't destroy the world. But in the time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there was no need to ever have the sign. For Rabbi Shimon had declared, I can free the world from judgment. Because Rabbi Shimon constantly strived to correct and bring completion to the affairs of the Jewish people. And his life was dedicated to trying to help not only others on a physical or spiritual level, but try to take away the judgment of the world. And Rabbi Shimon says, it's interesting, his spin on the idea of Pesach Sheni. He says, there's a verse who says, a man who is impure or on a far off way. Like if someone who is impure or far off during the first Pesach and couldn't bring a sacrifice can bring the second one. And Rabbi Shimon says, a man who is impure and not a community, that one person's Pesach sacrifice may be postponed, but not the majority of the community. Why does Rabbi Shimon espouse this opinion? Why can't he allow the entire Jewish community to delay the Passover sacrifice for a month? Why is it just that one person? Rabbi Shimon could maintain that why? He said he was trying to say that it's not possible that an entire community would become impure. Rabbi Shimon's life was dedicated to free the entire world for judgment. He constantly only wanted to bring out the positive and find the positive in any specific circumstance, and in this way, take away judgment from the world. He could never comprehend the idea that the entire community couldn't offer the sacrifice. Because if the entire community couldn't offer the sacrifice, either they were impure, there was something negative going on with them. So he said it's not possible the entire community could be impure, just one person. We see this similarly with one of the great Hasidic sages, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, who could never see negative in a person. He once came, he saw someone eating on Yom Kippur. And he said, oh, you must not know it's Yom Kippur. And he says, yeah, I know it's Yom Kippur. He said, you must not know that you're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. And he says, yeah, I know I'm not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. And he said, well, then you must not know like how grave the sin is for not eating on Yom Kippur. And the man says, yeah, I know all that. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak turns to God and he says, God, look at this person, look at this Jew. He's so truthful and honest. So despite everything negative that the Jew had just told him, he found the positive. He found the positive that the person was honest. And so too, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai always found the positive. He looked for the positive in the Jew. He never wanted to bring negative judgment on him. And we see this in direct contrast to the students of Rabbi Akiva who were trying to bring judgment and looking for the negative in the opinion of their fellow. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai strived to always find the good. And that's why Lag BaOmer is connected to the day that Rabbi Akiva's students were forgiven and they were able to right their wrongs. And we see it on the same day as the death of Rabbi Shimon, whose whole life was dedicated to finding the good in every person and in everything. And I want to relate one more thing because Lag BaOmer is coming, and it's a very special day, and it's a day of great blessings to the world. There was one of the Hasidic Rebbe, Chabad Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe. He would go out into the field on Lag BaOmer, and like I said, going out into the field is in nature is very connected to spirituality and Kabbalah. He would go out into the field, And it says he would give many blessings on that day. And so some of the blessings he would give are to women who weren't able to have children. He would give blessings to conceive. He would give blessings for people who were sick. He would give blessings to people who needed money for a livelihood. He would constantly give blessings, and these blessings were fulfilled. The blessings of Lag BaOmer were fulfilled. It's not one of the most popular or most well-known holidays, but it's a day that's full of blessings. It's full of the blessings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who brought so much positivity and life blessings to the world in his time, and so too on the day of his passing, his merits and his strengths are even more revealed in this world, and we can rely on the blessings of. There's a Kabbalistic saying that we can rely on the blessings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the merits of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and it's the day that Rabbi Akiva's students were able to. We were able to make a turnaround and correct their mistakes. And it comes also right after Pesach Sheni, which is a day that we're given the opportunity to better ourselves. Now, Pesach Sheni, we call it, like I said, it's the second Pesach. And some people call it the small Pesach. But it's actually not really the small Pesach. Because the small Pesach, it's not small at all. It's just as it has as much opportunity as far as, we're not having a Seder, but there's as much opportunity in this day as there is on the day of Pesach. And just like every single Jewish holiday and every special spiritual day, whether it's Shabbos or whether it's any other, special event on the Jewish calendar brings special light and strength into this world, so do these two special holidays. So I want to end here, and a little early today, that we should use this day for spiritual growth for ourselves and to bring that energy into our relationships with other people, and also just in general to bring light and warmth into other people's lives, even though, nowadays we might have to do it in a bit of a socially distant way, but we're still able to bring happiness to other people, whether it's through a phone call or sending a package or anything, like that. So, and on Lag BaOmer, which is coming up on Tuesday, hold on. I believe that it's Wednesday, or it's Tuesday or Wednesday. Lag BaOmer is Tuesday. So Lag BaOmer, which is coming up on Tuesday, is also a special day. There might be, I'm sure there's a lot of concerts and similar uplifting events online. If you're in Gainesville, we're going to have a drive through Lag BaOmer celebration where people could pick up hot dogs and burgers and watch a clown. And I'm sure in every single city there is some kind of a special celebration on Lag BaOmer. So with that, have a wonderful day and happy Pesach Sheni. Try to eat some matzah. And happy Lag BaOmer. And this should be a week of blessings for the entire world and healing.